Namaskar. This is Vivekanand. I've been teaching in Shamlal College of Delhi University for past 7 years. I've done my graduation from Ferguson College, Pune, and have done my MA in International Relations and MPhil in International Organizations from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. In this video lecture, I am going to draw your attention to the issue area of conflict. And in this, what I'm going to discuss with you is the power sharing dimensions or the resource sharing dimensions of the conflict, ideological dimensions of the conflict, and socio-cultural dimensions of the conflict. If we have a gauge, if we give a gauge at some past some decades, then we would realize that the scholars, academics, and philosophers have increasingly become interested in studying conflict and peace building. That is because, as a society, we have been witnessing conflicts in various parts of the world and also within states, within different communities, and also between and among individuals. And therefore, the issue area of conflict and peace building has attracted significant attention of the scholars and the academics who have put in their efforts in studying conflicts, various issue areas of conflict, and also possible solutions to the peace building. So, therefore, now I am going to discuss with you on various dimensions of conflict. So, if we look at the issue area of conflict and try to analyze various dimensions of conflict, we would realize that historically many wars have been fought over the possession or control of vital resources such as water, arable land, gold and silver, diamonds, copper, and petroleum. And conflict over resources figured prominently in the inter-imperial wars of the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. And these wars or these conflicts between the states have laid the groundwork, or they worked as the groundwork for the World War One. We know that after the Industrial Revolution in Europe in particular, the newly emerged industrial class in these countries wanted to establish its control over the resources in different parts of the world. So they went in different parts of the world and they established their imperial control on these countries. But this this led to the intense competition between different states, and then finally they descended down to the intense level of conflict, and that laid the groundwork for the World War One. We have witnessed the disastrous effects of the World War One. Also, an acute shortage of arable land and also fresh water. These resources seem to have been a significant factor in several conflicts in several parts of the world. The examples can be cited, or these examples can be seen in the conflicts that have occurred in Chiapas, Rwanda, and Zimbabwe. Competition over the control of valuable oil supplies and pipeline routes has emerged as a particularly acute source of conflict in the 21st century. Many analysts have also believe that the competition for oil was a factor in 1991 Persian Gulf conflict and also the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. And there is some sort of truth in this observation, because United States, to suffice the need of its economic growth, wanted to establish its control over the oil and gas resources abundantly existing in the Arabian Peninsula. And therefore, it wanted to have such regimes which can be congenial or which can be cooperative with it for its resource, this oil and gas resource needs, and the regimes which were not in favor of United States in its quest for its control over oil resources in this peninsula, they tried to overthrow them. That can be found in that can be found in United States invasion of Iraq in 2003, in which they dethroned Saddam Hussein and then they hanged him. Similarly, water as a resource of conflict also has emerged an important factor when we look at the conflicts between states, between the communities, and internationally. So, according to United Nations report has observed that 1.1 billion people live without drinking water, and 3,900 children die every day from the waterborne diseases. We know that the globe occupies 71% of the water resources through the means of the seas. But the clean drinking water, this water cannot be used for drinking purposes. Therefore, the water resources which can be used for drinking purposes are fast depleting, and that has emerged one of the issue area of conflict within the communities and between states. Violent conflicts over water resources have broken out in countries as diverse as China, Ethiopia, India, Kenya, and Yemen. Talking about China, China captured Tibetan Peninsula in 1959. So most of the scholars of geopolitics also ascribe this China's aggression to its quest to establish its control over the water resources, over the rivers that originate from Tibet. So the war between China and Tibet can be ascribed to the competition over the water resources. Similarly, in India's case, also, India has fought many wars with Pakistan, and some sense of this competition can also be ascribed to the water resource sharing over the river, the water of rivers in Indus River, Chenab, Ravi, Satluj, Bias. These rivers emerge in Himalayan region in Ladakh. So Pakistan wanted to establish its control, or Pakistan wants to use these resources. Though India has agreed, there is a famous Indus Water Treaty between Pakistan and India, but Pakistan wants total control over these water resources, and therefore there are so many wars which the two countries have fought. Similarly, such wars can be seen in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Yemen. In the Darfur region of Sudan, for example, much of the unrest is due to water shortages. Further, bodies of water such as oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers can also be linked to conflict due to their roles in transportation, development, and culture. This needs to be seen in the case of South China Sea dispute. China wants its control over that entire oceanic region, and also Philippines and Japan. They also want their fair share of influence in that region, and therefore there is a conflict between these states over the over seas of South China. A population's dependence on sources of income within the bodies of water, such as fisheries and offshore oil fields, can also lead to conflict. This can be seen in in the Cold War that emerged between Britain and Iceland over the competition between these two states over fishing in the ocean. So water resources for in terms of clean and pure drinking water, and also the control of the quest to establish control over water bodies such as oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers. These the water resource has become a source of conflict for communities and for also states, because the water bodies such as oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers play a very important role in transportation, development, and also culture. Culture, in the sense, for example, in India, we worship rivers. So, if the river is not respected or river is contaminated, then cultural sentiments of people can be hurt, and that further leads to some sort of conflict between the communities. Now, along with the water resources, there is also competition over the land resources. Because of the population growth and environmental degradation, land that can be used for personal, industrial, or agricultural purposes is becoming increasingly scarce. In recent decades or in this 21st century, we have been witnessing huge population growth, and that has led to the decrease in the land size. And we know the property rates are growing higher and higher in cities. So the water, the land resource for personal use is also becoming small. Again, water, the land resources can also be used for industrial and agricultural purposes. So because of the growth of the population, the land resources are depleting or land is becoming smaller, and there is a competition between communities over establishing control over such land resources. Possession of land results in access to, along with the land usage for personal, industrial, or agricultural purposes, land is also an important source for other resources such as minerals, timber, and animals. And therefore, land often holds high economic value. Any country or any society which has control over huge mass of land also has control over or also has access to minerals, timber, animals, and therefore the land occupies a huge economic value, and that also can become a theater of conflict between societies or between states. Traditionally, most wars have been fought over control of land. For example, the conflicts which emerged in Ecuador and Peru have been fought, the wars have been fought in Ecuador and Peru for several years. These wars were fought for several years, and the several wars emerged between these societies because of the, the border disputes between these countries. Besides, violent conflicts over land has occurred in East Timor, Kosovo, Rwanda, Tajikistan, and in the recent past, we can see such conflicts in various other parts of the world also. Then there is another very important source, and that is timber. Timber is very important for building houses and also uh, furnitures and many other such purposes. So timber functions primarily as a source of income. And as is the case with water, timber is an increasingly scarce resource. Why is it becoming scarce? Because, as the observers have noted, 46% of the old growth forests have already been destroyed. As it is said that 30% of the land mass is covered by forests, but this is also important to remember that 46% of the old growth forests have already been destroyed. This development has put a lot of pressure on timber resources, and therefore there is a growing competition between among communities, among individuals, and also between states in relation to establish control over timber resources. So as a commodity, timber is easily accessible, that is easily transportable, that is versatile, lucrative, and necessary for construction and development. Therefore, timber plays an important role in all stages of a country's economic and social well-being. And the competition for timber resources also can lead to conflict at all stages. So examples of conflict over timber resources can be found in the conflicts that emerged in Burma, Cambodia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Liberia. There's another resource that is oil and gas, which, as we discussed in the introductory part of this lecture, the oil resources have oil and gas resources have become very important theater of conflict for societies and also between states internationally. The US Department of Energy estimates that, and it has estimated, and it had said that by 2020, two-thirds of the world's known petroleum reserves will be consumed. We know such a situation exists around us today. Experts also say that easily accessible oil, especially in Saudi Arabia, is rapidly disappearing, and the world will soon face the end of the oil era. And wherever the oil is existing, a lot of efforts are being put in to extract the oil. So the oil resources are also fast depleting, and therefore they have given a way for the emergence of various conflicts. Moreover, many of the world's largest petroleum reserves, which can be found in the countries like Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Venezuela, and Sudan, these regions or these countries are facing tremendous amount of political instability, thereby putting a huge pressure on such resources. For example, in Iran, because of the political stability, instability exists there, and because of the antagonistic relationship it shared with United States, the very many countries, the NATO countries in particular, have put in sanctions, economic sanctions on Iran, and therefore the oil and gas resources available in Iran have become less accessible to many other countries. So the oil reserves may exist in countries such as Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Venezuela, and Sudan, but these countries are suffering from huge political instability, and therefore the oil resources which exist in these countries are fast or rapidly inaccessible to very many other regions which are these resource deprived. Then there is a conflict over minerals. So, according to the United States Agency for International Development, it has observed that valuable minerals become conflict minerals when their control, exploitation, trade, taxation, or protection contributes to or benefits from armed conflict. This needs to be understood in the context of primarily African region. So there are so many countries which have constantly been fighting with each other. There are so many countries which have been constantly fighting with each other, and various other groups within the country are also fighting with each other in their quest to establish their control over these valuable resources. And therefore, because these valuable resources have become a source of conflict between these countries or between these societies, these valuable minerals can also be termed as conflict minerals. So, these conflict minerals have varied commodity value and occur in many geographical locations. For example, these such such minerals can be found. Diamond can be found in Western Africa, amber in Russia, gold in Indonesia. We know in Western African region there are so many conflicts that are being fought in Russia also. Russia is fighting with Ukraine, and it is embroiled in the crisis. So these resources are available there, but these resources, the regions in which these resources are can be located are suffering from political instability. Diamonds are the conflict minerals that have received the most attention. They have been used by several rebel groups in Africa as a source of income, including groups in Angola and Sierra Leone. In these countries, the rebel groups are fighting with each other, and they have been using this the diamond as a resource, a valuable economic resource that generating wealth and fighting with each other. Resources such as diamonds, timber, minerals, and coca have been exploited by armed groups in several countries, including Angola, Cambodia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. The existence of easily captured and exploited natural resources not only makes insurgency economically feasible, and therefore the war becomes more likely. So natural resources revenues allow combatants to fight for a long time and encourage them to orient their activities towards gaining tangible assets like diamond mines. So Western African region in particular, where these valuable resources, which are also termed as the conflict resources or conflict minerals, these resources are being used to generate revenues, to generate wealth, and that wealth is being used for buying weapons. And these rebel groups are fighting with each other for a very long time. These groups could have come to some sort of standstill agreement between them, or they could have resolved the differences between them and could have come to some sort of peace building efforts. But they are not coming because they have enough resources with them. So they are buying more and more weapons. They are resorting onto widespread violence, and the conflicts between these rebel groups and between different groups in the Western African region have the conflicts have become intractable or protracted. The another dimension that we need to discuss about the conflict is the ideological dimension. So, as scholars have observed, ideologies are the core values or belief of a group, and ideologies are strongly tied to people's sense of self. The perception that one's core value or value set or ideology is being challenged or called into question can lead to or can lead to the situation in which the conflict is incited. For example, certain group believes in certain ideology, and when it feels that this ideology or when it senses that this ideology is being challenged from another group, then this group might resort onto violent practice, and that might lead to the violent conflict between these two groups. So the perception by one group that its core value set or ideology is being challenged by another group. So, such a sense or such a perception between the groups can lead to violent and widespread conflict. The belief that someone else's attempt to adapt an ideology or to changing circumstances is threat to the ideology itself. So, many people who believe in certain set of ideology, when they realize that their ideology is being appropriated by some other people, that also can lead to the incitement of conflict between these groups. And this is very important to remember that ideological conflicts are often become intractable. They go on for a very long time. As the groups which are involved in the conflict, the groups which are the parties to the conflict on the basis of ideology are very much resistant to come to any sort of agreement. They are resistant to any sort of resolution of their disagreements. They are very highly they are highly defensive of their ideologies, and they leave little space for any sort of communication. And in the absence of the communication, the distrust between the warring parties continues, and particularly wars or the conflicts which are fought on the basis of ideology can become intractable or protracted. Political ideologies such as fascism, Nazism, and Marxism involve certain set of fundamental beliefs about economic organization or governance of society. We already have discussed that ideological wars have been fought uh, in in Europe. The First World War and the Second World War can be said the wars of ideology, along with their competition for resources. These were also the wars of ideology, as they suggested. To one side, there were authoritarian regimes, and to another side, there were capitalist liberal democratic regimes. They fought First World War and the Second World War. And such a situation can also be found in the Cold War situation that emerged between United States and Soviet Union. After the end of the Second World War, there emerged two superpowers in the international politics. One, United States of America, which led the capitalist bloc; another, the Soviet Union, which led the communist bloc. And there was a constant ideological competition, ideological maneuvering between these two countries, and there there existed cold conflict between these countries for a very long time until in 1991 USSR got dissolved, and the height of tension between these two groups can be found in 1962 uh, to the development called Cuban Missile Crisis. Along with these political ideologies, the religious ideologies can also be a source of conflict. So, strong claims to exclusivity, the faithful are considered to constitute distinct, exclusive communities, and therefore, anybody who doesn't fit in this set are considered as enemies or antagonists. Uh, we can see that example. The followers of Christianity and followers of Islam fought 100 years of war, something called as crusades, uh, based on a religious ideology. They wanted to establish their control, or they wanted to spread their religious ideology in different parts of the world or across the world, and that led to the conflict between them, and they kept fighting. Religious belief can also become a motivation in political action. For example, a political leader can use a religious ideology to attain his own political motives. So the religious belief can also be used for political to gain political ends or to become successful in the political ends, and that also leads to the conflict between the certain set of believers of different religious ideologies. The third dimension of the conflict can be understood as socio-cultural conflict. By definition, social conflicts or socio-cultural conflicts can be understood as conflicts between the various groups and individuals within and across social groups, especially related to use of power. The socio-cultural conflicts particularly can be understood in the realm of usurping power. So these groups want more status for themselves, the more power for themselves, and that leads to antagonism between different groups, and that can become the source of conflict. The social conflict is the confrontation of social powers. So Kozer in 1956 has defined social conflicts as a struggle between opponents over values and claims to scale status, power, and resources. All social conflicts involve interests and identity. According to John Burton, in 1991, he says that interests are related to the occupational, social, political, and economic aspirations of the individuals. The social positions and roles in the society are created primarily through competition, but also through cooperation. So, in socio-cultural, in the realm of socio-cultural conflicts, what we need to understand is that various social groups, in their quest to acquire more power or higher status, they sort of develop animosity for other groups. So there is a group feeling. One group wants to establish its dominance over the group in terms of usurping more and more power for itself and more status for itself. And that finally leads to the conflict between these groups. That the similar idea can be found in the Cozo's definition, which was coined in 1956, and John Burton's definition, which was given in 1991. The competition for scarce position would in many times lead to a war of words which may escalate into a violent conflict. So when there is a competition for position, competition for status, competition for power, then there is also war of words between the groups or between the communities, and then the tensions between the groups which are involved in such sort of situation, which are embroiled in such sort of situation, then finally will become hostile to each other. The tensions might grow between these communities or these social groups, and then finally the violent conflicts can emerge between them. Positions are created to be filled by a small group within any given society, and with communities being composed of different groups, the confrontation to attain the power of another group has been witnessed over and over again. Now, as has been mentioned, there is a small number of political elites. But then, to acquire this political power or the political stage, there are other groups which have been kept out of the political power, out of the political status. They also might compete for such positions, and then that competition will lead to the conflict. For instance, leadership and governance issues and fight for clan supremacy have prolonged the conflict in Somalia for many years. We know in Somalia there is a constant socio-political and cultural turmoil. One group is trying to establish its clan supremacy over the other, and we have witnessed a long-term conflict which is constantly going on in Somalia. Similar conflict can be found in Kenya when the general elections were fought in the year 2007 and 2008, in which thousands of people were killed and injured. What happened was there was there was a president of Kenya named Mwai Kibaki. He was in power, and his opponent, the leader of the opposition, Raila Odinga, they were fighting for the position of presidentship. So the election was contested in the year 2007 and 8, but the Raila Odinga's group of TQ people, they did not accept the verdict of the general election that was fought in the year 2007 and 8. The Raila Odinga's group believed that Mawai Kibaki had rigged the elections and had subverted elections in his favor, and therefore they were unhappy with the results. They were not willing to accept the results that led to the conflict or the war between these two groups, and in which we know thousands of people were killed, injured, or displaced. Similar situation can be found in the Rwandan genocide, the Darfur crisis, the northern Uganda war, the Chad conflict, the Israel-Palestine conflict, and many other parts of the world. These conflicts can be ascribed to the socio-cultural dimensions of the conflict. Social positions are therefore a major factor in the region, and escalation in the social positions are therefore a major factor in the origin and escalation of many conflicts around the world. So, what we have discussed in this lecture is, or in this video lecture is, we have tried to understand the conflicts over resources. The resources are becoming fast, scarce, and there is a competition between individuals or among individuals, between different social groups, and internationally between states, and therefore they have become the scarce resources have become the source of conflict. Similarly, there are ideological conflicts. The political ideologies and the religious ideologies can also lead to the growth of conflict or the emergence of conflict between social groups and also between states, as has been observed in the Cold War situation between United States and USSR. And socio-cultural realm of social life in which individuals or social groups try to usurp in power or try to gain more and more power and more status for themselves, and they want to snatch the power from another group. That situation also leads to conflict between different groups. So this is how the conflicts can be understood in different dimensions. Along with that, there are many other sources which we will discuss in some other video lecture. Thank you for listening. Thank you.